I'm Jacquie Cohen Roth, founder, CEO of Cannabis MD and TPAD. Welcome to another Cannabis MD profile. I'm delighted to be hosting Sharon Bentley today, who is speaking to me from Australia. So we'll catch up in a moment, but brief introduction, what Cannabis MD is about. I founded it in late 2017 to help fill the void of cannabis science and policy education in the US. And very quickly, as things in the cannabis industry there's been a pretty significant global expansion. So these profiles are intended to educate our followers and our audience on all things related to cannabis, whether it be cannabis science or policy at the state, federal level in the US, as well as globally. So today we're focused on Australia. And Australia, for a little bit of backstory, Australia legalized medical cannabis in 2016. Its population is 25 million, and looking at a map overlay, it looks like it's roughly the continental US if you chop off Washington State, Florida, and New England, and that'll give you an idea of the size of the country. It has the key ingredients for significant domestic opportunities, with two forms of cannabis being legalized, again, medical cannabis as well as hemp. Medical cannabis is cultivated by companies that have been granted a medical cannabis cultivation license by the Office of Drug Control, or it's ODC. Hemp, on the other hand, can be grown by companies with a hemp cultivation license, which is issued at the state government level. Given the relatively low quantities of cannabis currently being imported into the EU, and the still slow growing but quickly expanding legal market, participation rates in Australia, the country's producers will need to be measured quickly as they scale their operations to ensure that there's not overproduction like was faced in Canada. The Australian legal cannabis market size was valued in US dollars at 41.2 million in 2020, and is expected to expand at a compound annual growth rate, or CAGR, of about 32.7%. And this was forecasted in 2021, and the number applies to 2028. According to the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, in July 2020, 41% of Australians supported the legalization of cannabis. That's close to double the support it received in a similar study in 2007. So in addition, as Australians become far more familiar with the medical applications of cannabis, particularly for chronic pain across the country, it's being far more accepted. So welcome, Sharon.
Thank you, Jackie. Thanks for having me today.
Absolutely. So I understand that it was via a visit that you had to the US that you were introduced to cannabis, and as many as the advocates have in the entrepreneurs industry, there's a personal connection. So if you'd share yours.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jackie. In 2014, I traveled to the States with my brother, who was a chronic pain sufferer and is a chronic pain sufferer. He's been self-medicating most of his life. And to be honest, Jackie, I didn't really know much about cannabis prior to that. I knew my brother self-medicated. I didn't understand it at all. I didn't really understand that it was a medicine. When we went to the States in 2014, we saw the emerging market in California, and we went into one of those little places on Venice Beach where they had the dispensary out the front and the doctor out the back. And my brother thought, okay, well, he went in there and to see what it was all about, and went in, saw the doctor, got a prescription, and came out with medicine. I could honestly say that I saw a significant difference in his energy at that time. It was the first time in his life that he's walked into a clinic, got some medicine, and walked out as a patient and not a criminal. So I can imagine for him that was a significant moment in his life. And from that moment, he realized that it was going to emerge in Australia. It would eventually become legalized, and he was delighted with the fact that he saw a future for himself as a patient and no longer being a criminal. Even at that point, I still can't say that I really understood the impact that it had on him, other than seen his energy change at that time. But when we came back to Australia, he really pushed me to learn more about it. We attended a number of seminars and educational sessions that were starting to occur in Australia just prior to the legalisation. And there was one in particular that I attended, and it had some doctors and scientists from the US and from all over the world, actually from Israel and from Europe, who presented actual case studies on patients and how medical cannabis had affected, had really impacted people's lives. And I was blown away. I have to say, I couldn't believe it. And from that moment, it was a significant moment of change for me to hear how it can really help people. And I've just really been immersed in the education and learning as much about medical cannabis and how it can help people over the past 6 to 8 years. When it did finally become legal in Australia in 2016, I just decided I really needed to be a part of it and, try and help educate other people like myself who didn't know and didn't understand. We've still got an awfully long way to go, and it's only because I had somebody in my life pushing me to learn that I did. But I think that, education is just really important and making people aware of what a significant difference medical cannabis can make in people's lives.
Yeah, very like-minded in that. So you are founding director of Medical Cannabis Australia. So as we're speaking, obviously the industry is very nascent in Australia. And so what year did you conceptualize your company? How did you build your team?
Well, we went and registered the business name very early, as you can tell. We got
a great name.
Yes. So we thought about it well before we registered that before it became legal. But the first couple of years since legalization, I spent learning more than anything. It's silly to sort of go into an industry, I think, that you know nothing about and just jump straight in. So I wanted to learn as much as I could. So learn about what was happening globally, and where our regulations were going to go so that I could decide where our place was going to be in the global market, not just in Australia. 2018, I left my other work and went full time into this. But to be honest, Jackie, it's still been very much an education. Our plan for our business is to build a cultivation facility, a manufacturing facility, and an R&D facility. That's just so much I need to know. I feel like a circus clown at the moment, spinning so many plates all at the same time. But there are so many areas of focus that I need to know about in order to make the right decisions for the company.
Yeah, I mean, that is exactly what you're speaking to is the challenges within the industry is because the industry is nascent, people are bringing in their skill sets from their previous professional life, so to speak. And then particularly you're running a company, building a brand, and with a goal of being a global entity. So that is quite a bit to take on. So with the regulatory structure, curious as to what that is in Australia. When you and I originally spoke, you did say that the licensing has changed somewhat since when you originally applied, and then if a company would be launching today in Australia. Where were you and where is it now?
Look, the industry in Australia, it's still very slow. Whilst it's been legal since 2016, there's literally one handful of companies that are successfully producing. I mean, the license application process originally started off as 3 separate licenses. So there was one for cultivation, one for manufacture, and a separate license for R&D. And what happened was the Office of Drug Control didn't expect so many license applications, and they were understaffed right from the get-go, which immediately caused a backlog in processing these applications. Also, being new regulations in a new industry, they've treaded very carefully in their progression of the licensing in Australia. For us, our experience was it took 27 months for us to receive our cultivation and manufacture license, which is a significant amount of time. And that was tough because prior to even applying for the license, you have to have your facilities, you have to, well, not facilities, you need to have the property, you need to have your plans, and nobody expected it to take 2 to 3 years to get your license. So a lot of companies have been sitting on these properties. It costs money.
Exactly. That's one of the challenges I was going to ask you. I mean, that's a significant, you're leasing land or a building for that long, and that's a significant investment, can be.
Or owning significantly sized property and not earning any income for years. It's tough, and it's just it really is just a money burn, and it's crazy, really. So it's a lot of people who have licenses in Australia. There's well over 120 licenses issued for cultivation and manufacture and R&D. But a lot of those licenses aren't being utilised. Some of these companies have lost the properties in those times. Some directors are burnt out through the process. It's tough. It's not easy. So we finally got through that process, and now we're in the investment stage, and that's tough too. So just getting off the ground, everything's it hasn't been an easy journey, but I have no doubt that with persistence and resilience, it's certainly going to be very, very rewarding. So as I said, we originally had the 3 licenses, and in December of 2021, they've changed it to a 1 license model. So when they had the 3 licenses, the Office of Drug Control were processing those licenses in 3 different departments. So it was a duplication of processing. So it might be the same property, but there are 2 different areas of the Office of Drug Control having to assess it. So the manufacturing section and then the cultivation section. So everything was
talking to each other.
Does governments different government departments ever talk to each other very well?
No matter where you are.
It's never really that smooth, is it? So it caused a lot of further delays. So they did do a review of the licensing scheme, and it's taken quite some time and they did have some industry consultation with that. And they implemented that in December 2021. So it's now a 1 license scheme. So the existing license holders are currently going through a transition from the 3 licenses to the 1. And any new applicants are just applying for the 1 license. So how that works, so you get your license and you build your facility, and then you've got to apply for a permit, which is the next stage of delays. So you've got your facility there built, and from my understanding, the permit process is still taking, not as much time as the licensing process. The Office of Drug Control is certainly streamlining and making improvements. But it's taking years to get there.
So, and how about patient access now? And I understand the patient count is relatively low and growing. And so if you can provide some sort of information of where it's been, where you are, and projections of where Australia is headed as far as patient counts.
Look, patient access is actually growing significantly. I think we're one of the fastest growing markets in the world. We're increasing by about 8 to 10,000 new patients per month being approved. But access for patients, because there are no registered medicines, access to medical cannabis is through a scheme called the Special Access Scheme, which means that patients are able to access non-approved or non-registered medicines. The problem with that is that Australian companies that are producing have to produce under the medicinal guidelines and have GMP certification. And up until now, another change that's happening, which I'll talk about in a moment, imported products don't even have to be GMP. So most of the products that patients are accessing in Australia are imported products that aren't held to the same regulatory standards as the locally produced products. That is changing next month. which means that any imported products also have to have GMP certification and comply with TGO 93 and TGO 100. So being held to the same regulatory standards that we are, which is great. But patients being able to access hasn't been easy because, first of all, the doctor has to have an authorization to prescribe non-registered products. Then the patient has to go through an approval process to become an approved patient to access those products. So again, we're all just waiting for products to be registered. In March 2021, so last year, it became CBD got down scheduled to Schedule 3, I think it is, which is an over-the-counter medicine. So CBD became available as an OTC product. And what happened the day that happened, patients started going into pharmacies to try and get their CBD products, but there were no medicines there. Pharmacists were ringing around cannabis companies saying, I've got patients walking in trying to access these medicines. Where are they? Well, there are none registered yet. And it takes a couple of years, as you would know, to get through those processes and clinical trials. So there are still, to this date, no medicines that are registered and available as OTC, even though it's been legal for almost a year now.
What countries are the products coming in from?
A lot of products are coming in from Canada. Some are starting to come in from South Africa now. I think there are some from a small amount from Israel and Portugal. So they're probably the key countries that products are coming in from at the moment.
And then how about patient safety? So, I mean, it sounds like the regulatory standards are behind. they're lagging significantly behind to patient safety. So, and that implies, you know, are there any COAs, a certificate of analysis, available?
Yeah, to import the products, you do have to have the COAs. Yeah. So that there is a certain standard you have to have, just not the same production standards as the Australian manufacturers, was what I meant before.
Okay, and then how about the physician engagement and with the certification for patients? Is it only physicians, or are there other healthcare providers? So that's two questions for you. Is one, how is physician engagement in the country, and then are other healthcare providers able to certify patients?
Yeah, look, there's the authorised prescriber scheme, which means that the prescribers need to, nurses, I believe, can prescribe through that, authorised prescribers, or doctors. But again, it's not easy for doctors they have to go through a process to become approved to be able to prescribe these products. I think, look, a large part of the problem is education again for doctors. You know, there are over 230 products on the market. What do they prescribe? You know, a patient comes in and says, you know, they've got chronic pain. You know, the doctor has no idea, first of all, where to get the products from. So that's another significant problem.
So when you say, interrupt you for a second. So when you say 230 products, is that 230 different, so there's capsules available, there's different delivery methods available?
All sorts of things. So, you know, you've got all of the dried flower products, which I think patients and doctors up until a year ago didn't even realize they could prescribe. So it's understanding what they're allowed to prescribe, the regulations, and because we're working across different regulations, there's the State Poisons Act, and then there's the Narcotic Drugs Act, and so there's all of these different regulators and regulations that they need to understand. First of all, to understand the process, they need to understand where they're getting the products from, which is just all over the place at the moment. There's no central source of information for the doctors. And knowing what to prescribe, like I said, I mean, cannabis companies, the doctors are probably being inundated by cannabis companies with different products. how do they know how do they know what's best to prescribe for this patient without that education? It's just tricky. There's a lot of work that needs to be done here, and it's all just very slow, but we are getting there.
What are are there requirements for physician education and the nurses prior to prescribing? In the States, we have our continuing medical education or CE hours that are required in most states for a healthcare provider to recommend cannabis. Is there that similar model?
Look, I'm not 100% sure, Jackie, to be honest, but I don't think that there is any essential education that the doctor has to go through in order to prescribe cannabis at this stage.
Okay. Okay. And with it sounds like, that the ship has left the port, the sailors are on board, and they're figuring out how to steer the ship. So with that is, as the regulatory standards, the GMP standards are being essentially built, what countries is Australia looking to as a model? US, Germany?
Look, probably Germany more so. US because it's not federally legal, so it's a bit hard to compare those two different markets. And I don't think, and Canada has had quite significant problems, which you alluded to earlier, with oversupply, and it's certainly not something that we want to follow suit. And I know that the Office of Drug Control are very conscious of volumes that companies are intending on producing, and ensuring that there is an end market for those products before they're produced. But so, look, I would say we're probably a little closer to the German regulatory markets and standards.
Okay, and then let's dive into your company. So Medical Cannabis Australia. So when are you anticipating that you're actually going to begin growing a crop and it coming to market?
Mid to late 2023. So, we've still got a lot of regulatory hurdles to jump through. We've still got permitting to do. We've still got to build the facilities, which is, we're finalising our design now, ready to build. So, I would say 12 to 18 months away from producing. The reason being, we're not trying to be the first company to market. We want to understand the markets, and we also think it's really important to time everything in line with our R&D activities, which we're commencing sooner rather than later. Rather than just building a large facility and supplying products through the special access scheme, which is very limited and very difficult, not easy for patients to access. And, we have a great opportunity for exporting in Australia as well. I think we're very, very well positioned for export. But again, the global market, it's getting very, very competitive now. So, we also as a company need to have an end market for our products. So we're commencing R&D projects, and the construction of our facilities will line up perfectly with having a registered product on the market and ready to produce our own products at the same time.
Are there any particular disease states that you're focused on with your R&D, and if you can share of what your focus is with your R&D?
Yeah, Jackie, our focus is the ageing population and palliative care. The reason being, obviously, the ageing population is growing significantly. It's more than doubled in the past 10 to 20 years. And it's a growing market, and it's a market that we feel can be really impacted by medicinal cannabis. We're focused on quality of life, and we really believe that medicinal cannabis can really make a significant impact on the quality of life of the ageing population. Palliative care also is an area which doesn't seem to get a lot of R&D attention. But again, it can really help improve the quality of life of palliative care patients. So that's our focus. We also have a focus on veterinary products. And the reason we're doing that is because it's faster to market. So we will have a veterinary product. We'll launch with a veterinary product at the same time as working on our human products, because that just takes a significant amount of time to go through those clinical trials and registration processes.
And what would you say is your company's market differentiator between those that are already in market?
Look, I think we're really focused on high quality and low cost. So the facility itself is completely designed around low cost production. Obviously, solar power will make a significant impact in that. The processes, streamlining processes to ensure that we're able to produce the medicines at the highest quality and lowest cost. Registering products, I think, is really important as well for patient access, and we'll make an attempt to have insurance companies subsidise those products once they're registered, because having access to products is one thing for patients, but being able to afford them is another thing altogether.
So there will be, or there is reimbursement for patients in Australia? There
isn't yet, but it's something that we're really focused on working with and trying to achieve.
And what the greatest challenge right now is you're not under a roof, you're not under a grow. So is it the financing?
Well, that's where we're at the moment. And right. With everything that's happening in the world, where we were at last week and where we're at this week is a different position altogether, isn't it? So,
right. Yeah.
So that's the challenge we're facing at the moment. Who knows what's going to happen over the next couple of months with the financial market. So the timing's probably not the best, but either way, we're proceeding with our R&D projects and with registering products. So that will always be the first focus for us.
Yeah, so for our audience, for perspective on where we are today, is that Russia has declared that it has invaded Ukraine. So of course, that's having significant impact on global markets. And cannabis has certainly weathered the storm, so to speak, through COVID, and the market is continuing to grow. As you were saying, the global markets competition has picked up. So question for you, we're ending on a more personal note, is your brother involved in the company?
No, he's not. My brother suffers chronic pain. As I said, he's got a broken back in 3 places. We're building a very large facility. He would really struggle to work in the facility, unfortunately, but he has great knowledge about cannabis, and I do like to, get some of that knowledge from him as well.
You have that firsthand patient experience right there, which is worth quite a bit. So as we post this during the month of March, which is in the US, is Women's History Month, and March 8th being International Women's Day. And so the question to you, does Australia recognize the day?
It certainly does, yes.
As a female founder to another female founder, I applaud you on what you're doing, and as well as the grit and resilience that it takes to build out a company. I applaud your efforts and your focus on the palliative care market. It's something that's been near and dear to my heart. I've been involved with hospice and palliative care for a couple of decades now, supporting institutions where I am in the States. So thank you for your time. And if somebody is interested in investing in your company or learning more about your company and connecting with you, how should somebody do that?
You can email me, sharon@mcau.com.au.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much, Sharon, for your time, and wishing you best of luck. And as I started our conversation, is asking how my tomorrow is today. Fewer hours ahead of me. So I hope you have a great rest of your day. And thanks so much for being part of this.
Thanks for having me, Jackie. It's always lovely to talk to you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.